What up, what up, what up? Welcome into another edition of Green with Envy. As always, this is your boy Will Weir. How you doing? How you living? It's that type of morning, guys. It's that type of morning. Joining me today to help process, cope, be my therapist, get me through the day, all of the above. It's my podcasting cousin from across the pond, the captain of the Taylor gang, Adam Taylor. Adam, how are you doing today, my friend?
I started the day well, then I watched that game. Now I'm not so good. I'm
Yeah, no,
okay.
that's about right. That's about right, man. I mean, I said this to you as we were getting ready to record here. You know, obviously we're recording this the morning after the disaster known as the Atlanta Hawks beating the Boston Celtics 119 to 117 on a last second 3-point dagger from Trae Young to just silence the Garden crowd. And I can't imagine what it was like inside that building last night. As deflated as I was on my couch in Austin, Texas, I can't imagine how deflated it was to walk out of that arena last night watching the debacle that we're going to try and parse through today.
Debacle is the right word. I don't know where I want to start, but I know that I'm going to finish with a very strong statement that's going to polarize people. So I'm going to hold that and make you wait till the end of the show for that.
Well, let's start right here for a second, because there's so much to get into from the game itself, the context surrounding the game, and how it leaves you feeling about this team here going forward. And some of that may not even matter, which is like the weirdest part of this team, this NBA season. But just tell me, so today as you watch this game, and I know that you usually go in without knowing what happened. You just wake up, put it on. You don't want to be influenced by, what you might see on Twitter or what you might see across the internet. This is the first time I've lost sleep in a long time after a Celtics game, but this fucking stung. I don't have any other way to say it. What were your just visceral reactions finishing this watch?
Yeah, so quarter one, like first quarter, I'm cool. I'm like, yep, okay, it's a tight game. Atlanta are bringing it, but you expect that because it's a win or go home for them. And that kind of felt that way up until the fourth. Now I felt there was failings throughout the first, second, and third. Tatum was struggling. I liked how when his shots weren't falling, he moved into more of a facilitation role because Jaylen Brown had it going, so he didn't need to try and force anything. But then, and then the fourth started, and you're feeling good, right? Like there's still a bit of a lead there that they can control it. If they control the pace, they pretty much control their own destiny. You get down to that 5-minute mark, and everything just goes to shit. And the intensity kind of disappeared late in the third, early in the fourth, that defensive intensity that Boston had been playing with. And then I spent the next 5 minutes, 5 basketball minutes, which is like, 40 real life minutes, waiting for that intensity.
It was an eternity last night, waiting for something to change.
Just waiting for that intensity to come back, just waiting for somebody to be like, yo, we just need to close this game out and the series is over. We don't have to see these fools anymore. It's done. They can go on holiday, on vacation. We can do what we're doing. No, dude, Atlanta wanted it more. I felt like Atlanta were the better coach team. I felt like Quinn Snyder controlled the pace of the game from the bench more than what Joe Mazzulla did. And then that last 16 seconds, I felt like Joe Mazzulla just showed how inexperienced he is. And that's like, I feel unfair there, right? Because like Ime Udoka was inexperienced last year as the head coach, but I felt like he allowed himself to learn more on the fly throughout the regular season than what Mazzulla has. I feel like Mazzulla comes with a bit of a stubbornness with him. And I don't think he's evolved.
I mean, the one thing I will say, and this is not going to be a very heavy defensive Joe Mazzulla podcast, the one thing that I will give him some leeway on is that closing games has been a 3-coach problem. This has been a problem even dating back to the Brad Stevens era. For whatever reason, this version of the Celtics, the core, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, Al Horford, the guys that have been here for multiple years over multiple conference finals runs, closing out games has always been an issue. So I will at least give him a little leeway on that, but that's about the most pro Joe Mazzulla thing you're going to hear on this podcast, that this is a long-standing problem.
I just want to jump in there and say that one, that I remember that was one of the whole reasons the Celtics went and picked up Kyrie. It was one of the whole reasons they wanted Gordon Hayward and so forth, because everyone was like, they need a closer. So it's not even just like it's been a problem. It's been recognized by the fans, the media, the front. It's been a recognizable problem. However, in this specific instance, it's not totally on the players. The players deserve all of the blame and all of the smoke for letting that game slip away. They were in a winning position in a winnable contest, and then they took their foot off the gas. That's on them. But that last 20 seconds of basketball play, that's on Mazzulla. Like, I feel like that was his mistake. Like, he didn't close that game. He could have won that game for Boston by being a head coach.
Yeah.
And he just chose not to do it, and it was bullshit.
So I think that's the first place that I want us to start is we'll talk about the coaching, and I think we can get into specific players, plays that ultimately led to the full demise of the Celtics. But before we do that, because I said this game hit me in a way that I haven't been hit by a game in a while, I wanted to share something with you, Adam. So I wanted to share with you an analogy that came to me at just 3 a.m. this morning, because this game decided to wake me up, and this is where my psychotic, crazy mind went to, was trying to think about how I can describe this game, or what even this game was that I watched last night. And it made me think a little bit about, we've seen this before, right? We should have learned a lesson. We've seen this type of game before. We talked with our guy Greg before. He was on here saying, I missed the end of the game, but I already know what happened. I know what happened. I could tell you the script of this. And so, let me check in with you real quick here, Adam. How's dog training going with our guy King Henry? How's that going so far?
It's hit and miss, right? Like, some days it's working, some days it's not. We were working literally 20 minutes ago. I was working in the field with him on his recall, and he just wasn't listening to a word I had to say.
So this is kind of where I was going with this analogy. Is it made me think a little bit about, because this is an experienced team at this point. This is a team that you feel like, man, even though there's lessons throughout the season that let us know, hey, not too much has really changed about this team over the last couple of years, especially in this circumstance. But you think about, once again, the context of what is happening in these playoffs and how it is lining up for the Celtics. And you look back at last year and some of the lessons that should have been learned from Game 5 Milwaukee, from Game 1, Game 5, Game 6, almost Game 7 in Miami, from Game 3 Game 4 against the Warriors, about how important it is to close out these games. And it made me feel like, I was thinking of back when my dog Taco was a puppy, and he had a little bit of anxiety when we leave him alone. So, he would get a little restless. He might, rip up a blanket. He might, get into some shoes, cause a little havoc. So we had to really, build him up, right? We had to leave him alone for 10 minutes. Then we had to leave him alone for 30 minutes. And then it was up to an hour, 2 hours, until the point where we felt comfortable, like, hey, our guy's killing it. Our guy is at the point now where he gets it. He knows what the goal is. He knows we're coming back. We're good. We're in a good place here. We can go out for the night. Adam, let's go hit the town for a little bit. We'll go out for a few hours, have a couple drinks, come back. And then when you come back and you think everything is settled, you think that you're at a time where you've learned, in this case, the Celtics or my dog Taco has learned from their previous mistakes. And as soon as you open the door, you just get this pit in your stomach. It just fucking drops to the floor. The blankets are tattered. Shoes have been eaten. And god damn it, there's a steamy turd on the carpet. That's what this fucking Celtics game was last night. A giant steamy turd that reminded me this is not a serious team when it comes to learning lessons and closing out games. And it's back to the basics of feeling unconfident in every single closeout meaningful scenario that this team has. And it's just really tough, because it felt like, between all of the learning experiences in years prior, the journey to the finals last year, the way things are shaping up this year, that this was the moment the Celtics could take the reins. And then we get the steamy turd that we got last night. Yeah, I don't know if that worked or not, but that was the thought that came to my mind at 3 a.m. last night, and I had to get it out there.
No, so first of all, if you ever awake at 3 a.m. again, just text me, dude. I'm up. It's 8 a.m. my time, maybe even 9, depending on the time difference. 2, that makes perfect sense. They are that puppy that got trained, but is still slightly unreliable at times. They do get anxious. They do get, like, knocked off kilter. Like, I think that's probably the best way to put it. And they don't control their own destiny in points of time where they should be. Now, this is a team, remember, that coming into the postseason, we were like, it's a sweep. At worst, it's a gentleman's sweep. It's 4-1.
Yeah.
Well, no. Now we're going into game 6.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is still unfathomable to me that come Thursday night, most likely Greg and I will be live streaming after the game, win or lose. Because at this point, you can go back in the archives, like you said. To your point here, we were saying this is a sweep, gentleman's sweep at worst. Greg and I in the last podcast, I asked the question and I agreed with Greg. I'm not trying to put this on him. We didn't even think of it. It's like I am beyond whatever you can go above 100% confidence rate that we're closing this out. We were there. We're 115, 120, whatever it was. And now we're here. And like I said, to my turd theory point, I don't know. Are we going to be back here on Saturday doing a 3-man weave for game 7? I think that's just as likely as whatever other scenario is out there now.
I mean, let me just put it like this. And I mean, no disrespect to the Knicks when I say this, right? But the New York Knicks are having more success against the Cleveland Cavaliers, who are a far better team than the Atlanta Hawks, than what the Celtics are against Atlanta. I feel more confident that the Knicks are going to close out their series than I do that Boston are going to close out their series. I can genuinely see a world where the Celtics shit the bed and end up in a game 7 in the first round. And every game you don't close this out, you're giving Embiid more time to recover. You're giving Embiid a chance to get back to full health. When really, if you took care of business a few days back, you'd already be trying to figure out how you're going to beat a Joel Embiid-less Sixers for probably games 1 and 2. So not only are you hurting yourselves now, you're also hurting yourselves if, and now I'm using if rather than when, you make it into the second round.
I just had to jump in.
Yeah, we have a producer. Producer Greg has jumped into the mix. What you got for us?
Oh man! So with the Knicks thing, I was texting our buddy Matt Liptak, who's a huge Knicks fan, and I told him last night, I was like, I'm not being reactionary. I truly think that I trust Jalen Brunson with the ball in his hands in the fourth quarter more than anybody on the Boston Celtics. And like, it might seem hyperbolic to say that, but when all the stuff that you guys are talking about, how over the years this team has not been able to close out games, like we just don't have anybody right now that I feel confident having the ball down the stretch. And the Joe Mazzulla thing is a real issue, and I just love the steamy turd theory.
The thing is, though, wasn't Brogdon meant to be that guy that could help you?
Where is he, Adam? He can't help you on the bench, Adam.
That's the problem, right? You go out, you bring in a guy that's specifically designed for the situation you found yourself in down the stretch against Atlanta, and Mazzulla's like, nah, fuck that. Let's go Blake Griffin.
Well, hold on one second, Adam. Let's do this because we're jumping in here. Let's take a quick break, and then let's jump into all the Joe Mazzulla of it, and then we'll continue on down that path. All right. Joe Mazzulla, you've been summoned. This is Will and Adam's court. We want to talk about your behavior last night and whatever the hell was going on. Adam, I cut you off right before this. You're starting to talk about how, part of the reason the Celtics got Malcolm Brogdon is for situations when we kind of need an adult in the room, right? We kind of need an adult to settle down the offense. Well, he can't do that when he's on the bench. You're 6th man of the year. The NBA's 6th man of the year, just to repeat that, cannot do that when he is physically sitting on the bench as the team is breaking down. And for some reason, and you started to say this, Adam, and I don't know if this is a weird minutes randomizer thing that Joe Mazzulla has been doing the last couple games between Grant, Mike Muscala, and Blake Griffin. But for whatever reason, we got a very random 5-minute Blake Griffin stint in the middle or in the fourth quarter last night as you're trying to close out a series from a guy who hasn't played not just all game, all series. And let's start there and then make our way through the other decisions that we have questions about. But in the words of Nancy Kerrigan, why?
So I understood the Blake Griffin decision to an extent, right? When Blake Griffin was introduced, it was a few minutes after that you saw the Celtics kind of take their foot off the gas. They weren't playing with the same energy as they were to end the third. And I thought that Blake Griffin was brought in there just to try and galvanize the team, just try and be that guy that comes in and everybody wants to play harder because Blake's there to win a ring after a career of never really getting that close. It just didn't go that way. I think 5 minutes was far too much. A 1-minute spot might have done it, but it was the same thing with Mike Muscala in the last game. I have a lot of issues with not playing Grant Williams, so I'm going to get there. But let's stick on the Brogdon thing for a moment. So Brogdon gets pulled about 2 minutes into the Blake Griffin experiment. He doesn't see the floor again. Does not see the floor again. Why? When Marcus Smart, I will give Marcus Smart props. He has been really consistent all series until this game. This game was the worst Marcus Smart game of the series. That's not an insult because he has been playing at a really good level. So to run with Marcus Smart when Malcolm Brogdon is on the bench and he's been having a good game, he's been one of the guys that has not only pushed the pace but kept his foot on the gas. And then, you know, you can bring in Derek White and you've got an all defensive team like potential guard. You've got 6-man of the year Malcolm Brogdon. That made more sense to me than leaving Smart out there. It made more sense to me than, you know, why the fuck did Blake Griffin play 5 minutes?
I honestly
2 minutes max.
And here's the thing. I understand the points that you're making to try to present the other side of Blake Griffin coming into this game. You're trying to close out a series. You're closing out a series. This is not game 1, game 2. This is game 5. You're up by double-digit points at home against an inferior opponent with all the other context that you laid out. Milwaukee
missing their second best player.
Missing their second best player. Milwaukee's down 3-1. Joel Embiid is injured and praying to God that he doesn't have to at least try to give it a go until Monday or Tuesday of next week. If you win last night, you are playing Saturday, game 1 in the Garden. And from every report, there is not a chance in the world Joel Embiid is going to play. Or if he does play, he is going to be nowhere close. Now, it's only going to be maybe 24, 48 hours in. But once again, we're back to if, because there's no more assuming that this team is going to get the job done. And so to bring in a guy like Blake Griffin, cold from weeks of not playing, not just that game, weeks of not playing basketball, to come out there into that moment, into that game. There's part of me that the Hawks, 2 things. One, took it as an insult because it kind of felt like the Taco Fall moment, like, hey, let's go ahead and bring in this guy that the crowd loves because we think we're moving on, which I don't know that that's necessarily Joe Mazzulla's mindset, but if you're the Hawks, I would internalize it that way and kind of give you a big middle finger right back. And I think you saw their intensity turn up, as well as it kind of feels like a mental victory. The Celtics have, for the most part, have been and should have been dominating, maybe even more than they have been. And last night, between Rob and Al, you looked at, I think between the two of them, they had 7-8 block shots. You bring in a guy like Blake Griffin, he's not really, much of a rim protector. You're going to be okay with him taking shots on offense. And so it's almost a little bit of a mental victory for the Hawks. He ends up being a net neutral, basically zero, was plus minus was at 0 for Blake Griffin in those 5 minutes. But I think it's a little bit of a mental victory for the Hawks as well, thinking that, yeah, we have Blake Griffin out here right now. And the Celtics teetered between that 6 to 10 point range all night. And, it wasn't until we got under about, 4 minutes that they were really able to break that. But I think those Blake Griffin moments, you're going for the kill. You're not looking to stabilize. You're looking to go for the kill. And that's not the move bringing Blake Griffin in.
No, I mean, look, when Blake Griffin was added, he was always going to be a regular season depth piece. He was, and the way that you should internalize it is he's not going to play in the postseason. The only reason he plays in the postseason is if every big comes down with food poisoning and misses a game, and he just didn't happen to be at the team meal. That's the only reason Blake Griffin should be playing. Literally just that. Same with Mike Muscala. Now, when you put Blake Griffin in, I understand 2-minute stint just to re-galvanize the team, get the crowd behind you, and kind of put some wind in your sails to lead you home. Fine, I'm cool with it. I still think it was far too early in the fourth quarter to do that. There was plenty of time, as we saw, for Atlanta to turn the tides, which they did. I also think that, if you've got minutes to play Blake Griffin, you've got minutes to play Grant Williams that can actually give you something.
For sure.
That can give you a catch and shoot threat, give you a screening threat, a handoff threat, attack closeouts. He could do a bunch of different shit. And so why would you go with Blake when there's Grant there that's also being a big part of this team getting to an NBA Finals 12 months ago? Makes no sense to me. I just genuinely think that there's something that we don't know happening behind the scenes between Joe and Grant, because it's the only reason I can think of that he's not in the rotation right now. Do I think that Blake should have played? No. I understand as well that the Al Horford Trae Young matchup has been an issue for a few games now. I think that's been something that Atlanta has looked to take advantage of. You know, if Al's on the perimeter, they're screening and getting Trey switched onto Al, so Trey can take advantage off the dribble. If Al's in drop, they're getting Trey into the mid-range so we can attack with the floater. Horford's just had a whole heap of problems trying to guard Trey in space. So maybe they felt like Blake might be able to just do something different. I don't know how, but
yeah,
maybe.
I mean, in theory, that doesn't even sound good to me.
No,
you know,
no.
But it's
the only thing I could think of, right? Like,
yeah,
why
this
else?
is where we're at. This is where we're at right now. We're grasping because Joe doesn't give you any answers in the post game. He just says that's playoff basketball. Yeah, he just gives you these generic bullshit answers. It's what the playoffs is. No, Joe, this game was fully capable of not falling apart. This game was, and we're going to get to the players that are at fault as well here too, because there is a balance of the two. So we're going to get to that in a minute. But we're sticking on Joe Mazzulla here, and let's transition to one of the issues that it's been low-hanging fruit basically all season of what's the deal with Joe Mazzulla in timeouts. And it reared its head again here in a way that Joe Mazzulla, Celtics, just fast forwarding all the way to the end of the fourth quarter here with 16 seconds left. Joe Mazzulla still has 2 timeouts in his back pocket and is reluctant to call them. He's basically forced into calling it because halfway through that final possession, I think the ball went out of bounds. Can't remember exactly what happened, but there was 9.5 seconds left. And finally, he called a timeout instead of just playing through it. And, you know, along with his very confusing rotations, which we've kind of leaned into here about Brogdon not being out there, Blake being out there for whatever reason. You know, even his management of Derek White and Marcus Smart at the end of the game was really hard to figure out. You know, for a moment, I thought he was doing an offensive defensive thing with 2 guys that you don't need to really do that with. But like you said, Adam, I genuinely don't know, which is why we are just grasping at theories here. And once again, the constant of the season, like I said, we should have learned that this team hasn't learned certain things throughout the regular season. We should take those for what they mean. Joe Mazzulla has timeouts just chilling in his back pocket again for the reasons that I don't think you, I, or many people listening to us right now can truly understand.
I said this before we came on air. I think that Joe Mazzulla isn't as creative offensively as what we thought he was. And I think that there's a little bit of paralysis by analysis going on there. Like, I genuinely believe he's trying to figure out what type of play would work. And he's paralyzing himself by overanalyzing during the game and then not calling the timeout because maybe he just doesn't have the confidence that he can make a difference by drawing something up. Maybe he genuinely does believe that the team are going to play through it, but we have enough of a large enough sample size that this team generally is not going to play themselves out of a slump. They're going to continue digging that grave until somebody steps in and repositions the ship. Joe just isn't that guy at the moment. I don't understand his... Like, I get it. There's like a blind faith there, but like that Jaylen Brown quote that Jared Weiss tweeted out that I mentioned to you before. So the quote goes, "We pride ourselves as players making the right play and adjustment. At times, we leave that up to the coaches to make that decision. We got to be better overall as a team, coaching staff and players on getting organized in those moments, whether we call timeouts or not." I've read that as, yo, if we're not calling timeouts, yeah, it's on us as the players to organize ourselves, but shit, the coach has got to be better at calling timeouts. And I just think that it's been, as you said, it's low-hanging fruit. It's been a long-standing issue. It's been here all season long. It's nothing new. But this comes back to what I said earlier, where for all of his faults, and there's a lot, obviously, and I'm not one to say, like, you know, I'm not one to champion for Ime Udoka at any point. I don't know what happened. I'm not going to say I do. But at least he evolved through the season. He learned from his misgivings during the regular season and corrected course. Mm-hmm. There hasn't been a course correction from Joe Mazzulla this season. He's doing everything he did wrong at the start of the season. I'm pretty sure he's still doing it now.
Yeah.
And I think that's where my biggest gripe is. Like, yo, you keep saying players need to be better. We need to improve here. We need to improve there. Like, dude, leadership, man. Look in the mirror and you improve on the things that you're making mistakes with. Until that happens, man, I just don't have faith.
Yeah, I think we need to have a talk with this. Is it professor? Is that his sensei's name? His professor.
The professor. Yeah.
Yeah. I think collectively someone needs to go have a talk with him and then relay that to Joe.
Beat you up, man.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, that's true. Maybe I don't want to mess with crazy Joe Mazzulla.
It's like the Terminator, right? Shit. Or what was that one where you look in the mirror and say his name 3 times?
Candyman.
Candyman. Yeah.
Candyman. Yeah.
Just look in the mirror and say Missoula 3 times, see what happens, man.
See Missoula 3 times, maybe you'll get a timeout. Maybe that will happen here. But all right, let's take another quick break here. And I think that Jaylen Brown quote is pretty impactful, because I do think, there is some where the players just on the court have to do better, but there's a lot where the coaching. I think we've covered the coaching aspect. Let's go to the player side of this. Let's take a quick break though, and then we'll come back and we'll hit that. All right, Adam. So we've covered the Joe Mazzulla of it all. Now it's time to get into some of the players' plays that happened on the court that we need to talk about, that just led to this breakdown. And one thing I want to call out is Jaylen Brown was fantastic in this game. For the first 3.5 quarters, it was it was miles of difference. He was the best player on the court by several miles, by any aspect that you want to look at. But towards the last 5 or so minutes of this game, man, it really fell apart. Jason Tatum's overall game was just really, really tough to watch last night. You mentioned before, you touched on it. He did do a great job of facilitation, had 8 assists last night. But God, he couldn't throw a basket in the ocean, and never fully committed to changing course and just getting downhill, because he could have every time. I mean, that's something we've seen in this series, that whether it's him or Jaylen Brown or Malcolm Brogdon, that if they want to get downhill in the series, it's open and available. It's something that's out there. And if Jason Tatum was even lukewarm, this game would have been out of reach by the time we even got to the opportunity for there to be a collapse. So, Adam, where do you want to start as we start to look at different players and their roles within the debacle that was Game 5 at the TD Garden last night? Do you have a particular place that you want to start?
Yeah, I think we start at the top. I think we start with Tatum and then work our way down the rotation, because the lion's share of the underperforming blame when you're on the court goes with the best player.
Yeah.
And then it trickles down from there. Not the best player on the night, the guy that's meant to be your franchise guy,
your guy superstar, your top
he's meant
5,
to bring
6,
you home.
7 guy in the league, who should be the one bringing you home, closing out games against inferior opponents at home, wasn't there last night.
So I wrote this I'm working on today's newsletter, and I'll shameless plug. And I wrote this just to end it, and it was just, in a game where the Celtics could have closed out, in a game where they needed their star player to set up, Jason Tatum wasn't there. He didn't turn up to, I'm paraphrasing, didn't turn up with a big shot to take the wind out of the Hawks' sails in the last 5 minutes. And now, rather than a game where he could add it to his resume as went off for 40 to close out a first-round series, it's another goose egg on a playoff resume that, for Tatum, has a few too many goose egg games. And there's a point in time where we have to stop making excuses for Tatum when the opposition turn up the pressure and all of a sudden he's not showing up. Because that seems to be, Tatum's biggest games are games with not much riding on it. He's had a few big ones. No, I'm not going to lie, some pressure.
Like Game 6 Milwaukee.
Yeah.
That's the peak of the Jason Tatum playoff experience that we've seen. But we've also seen the side last night. We've seen probably that side a little bit more often. Then, of course, you have a bunch of the games that fall.
So this was a good quote I saw on Reddit, and it was, I'm going to paraphrase again, but it was basically, in the playoffs, Tatum is more Paul George than he is LeBron James in terms of he's a regular season star that doesn't show up in the postseason. And at the moment,
that's a tough quote.
It's true though, right?
I mean, I at this point, I don't want to put him in that Paul George category quite yet, but it's
leaning that way.
But if I'm looking at a spectrum of Paul George to LeBron James, it's somewhere closer to Paul George than it is to LeBron James.
Yeah, and I think that this was a game where I really liked how he recognized JB had the hot hand. He recognized it wasn't falling for him, and he started to defer. But there's been a lot of times this season where Tatum's shot hasn't fell, and he's found a way to get to the rim to impact winning and to still have a good offensive production. He shot 1 for 10 from deep. He only went like 38% from the field in general. Like, you're meant to be leading this team, dude, not holding them back. I usually have nothing bad to say about Tatum, and I hate this soft narrative. The Celtics lose, oh, Tatum's soft. The team, no, fuck off. You don't get to the top of the NBA to be a top 10 guy in the league from being soft. Like mentally, that's just not. It doesn't correlate with where he is in life. But shit, man, he's got to figure something out against teams once they turn up the pressure. Because I left this game asking myself whether or not Tatum it should be the first guy, like the number one on this team.
Well, it's tough because I feel like and I'd love for you to speak to this from a schematic standpoint, but towards the end of the game, the Celtics weren't really running their offense through either of the Jays.
No.
It was kind of Derek White, Marcus Smart, and honestly, I feel pretty comfortable with Derek White. I think Derek White will at least make the right decision, so I'm actually okay with that. But this gets back to something that I just think and this is once again, this is a multi-coach, multi-year problem that I feel like we've never seen enough of in the closing minutes is some two-man J action. And especially with Tatum's advanced decision-making, him with the ball in his hand, allowing Jaylen Brown, as you said many times, is the finisher out of the two, allowing the two of them to have some type of two-man game at the end. I've never understood why that hasn't been utilized, because we get it in bits and pieces every now and then, and it feels like it's a revelation to everyone the handful of times throughout a season that we get that action, but we just don't get it enough at the end of a game. And I've never, whether it's Brad Stevens, whether it's Ime Udoka, whether it's Joe Mazzulla, no one's been able to provide me a reason as to why that isn't more of a go-to, especially against a team like the Hawks, where, you know, there's no Drew Holiday and Giannis that are both guarding the two of them. And it's like, well, we're not going to get a good matchup either way we go with this. You know, like you're going to have, I can't remember, it was DeAndre Hunter and Sadiq Bey that you're working with against here. Both of those guys, fine. They're fine players, whatever. I'm taking my chances in a Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum two-man game, especially with Tatum. With the decision-making was the one aspect of his game that I thought went well last night. Let them make that decision and then spread your guys out from there and have actions off of that. And we just never see it, and I don't get it. I don't know why.
Yeah, I can't give you an answer. I understand the idea of having one of Tatum or Brown on the weak side so the defense can't overload. That makes sense. It really helps your spacing. It underpins that spacing. But a Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown pick and roll with one of them popping and one of them rolling, like, well, one of them obviously dribbling the ball. So, you know, maybe Jaylen Brown pops, Jason Tatum drives. That's so much more difficult to defend than just having Jaylen Brown off ball on the far side corner or in the far side wing, or having Jason Tatum standing on the elbow on the weak side and not doing anything because Brown's cooking on the strong side. Like, I do agree. I will say this. I don't know if I'm a big Tatum fan. He's one of my favorite players in the league. I think he's my favorite player on this team right now. But I'm starting to lean into the narrative of he's more Scotty than MJ.
I'm not there with that yet. I mean, we talked about the fact that we're even saying he might be more Paul George than LeBron James. That's not.
That was a quote. That was somebody else's quote.
It was somebody else's quote, but we used it as a spectrum. We used it as a spectrum, and I don't know. Let's put that on pause. I'm not ready to dive into that full conversation.
I mean, I'm hoping I'm wrong.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that I believe that. I'm just saying that there's times, like in the last game,
there are times
where that thought crosses my mind to the point where I have to kind of sit there with it for a moment. I still think Tatum is the lead guy for this team. I still think he's the best offensive player on the team. Moving on.
I do too. I do too. And this is my last point, which is going to get us to our next point, is that late in that game, it was very weird to see, and this might have, I don't know if this was a coaching or a player thing. This is one of the things that we don't know because we're not in the huddle for the X's and O's. But the fact that Jason Tatum wasn't actively calling for the ball in the last 2 minutes stood out to me. That was just an alarming sight. Even though he's not having a great night, you still see the guys that are about that life, the guys like Jimmy Butler the other night, who I thought today we were going to have a fun time reminiscing on one of the greatest performances I think I've ever seen in a playoff game and what the damage that's done to Milwaukee. But that's just not enough time for that today. Not enough time for it. And he would have gone and got the ball. Even if Giannis is struggling, Giannis is going to go get the ball because he knows that that's what superstar players do. And so that was definitely alarming to see that. And, you know, all right. So like you said, it trickles down, right? So let's go to one of the next guys I think we need to talk about, and that's Marcus Smart. And in the sequence that really stood out to me actually involves both Jason Tatum and Marcus Smart. So I mentioned before, the Celtics kind of felt like they had like a 6 to 10 point lead for the majority of the game, really. And the commentators even said, this is a 10-point game. It feels like it should be 20. Like, this is kind of dangerous that it's only 10 points right now. Like, this should be a larger lead than what it is. And it actually, talking about that Milwaukee-Miami game, it reminded me a little bit of watching that game the other night where it was, man, Miami's doing such a good job hanging around. Jimmy just, not enough help, man, but he's going to keep it right in that 8 to 10 range. And then you know what? They gave him a little bit of light, and Jimmy took it over. Trae Young did that last night. But you know what? Damn it, we helped him do it. When you look at, with 3:26 left in the game, Celtics are up 111 to 105. Jason Tatum commits just a sloppy, careless turnover, commits a foul. Trae Young ends up going down the other side of the court, knocks down a three, got ourselves a 3-point game. Next possession, 3:01, Marcus Smart, reckless pass to in between 2-3 defenders in the lane. Turnover, back-to-back turnovers. Trae Young, once again, to his credit, and a guy that I do not like giving credit to, not a Trae Young podcast here, and he was ice cold last night, knocks down another three to make it 111 to 111. 2 careless turnovers from the guy that has been wanting to be the point guard for years, Marcus Smart, from your superstar, Jason Tatum. And those 2 turnovers, which, that swung the tide of them not being able to break that 6-point barrier. Those 2 turnovers, those stick out like a sore thumb as a massive turning point of, I don't think we're coming back from this at this point. I think we've lost control to the point that I don't expect us to get it back again.
Yeah, you're rushing decisions. You're making sloppy passes. You're making sloppy calls. Marcus Smart, to me, has improved dramatically at his innate ability to lose you a game. I think that he hasn't really cost you many games this year from Marcus Smart doing Marcus Smart things, but you still do get the occasional boneheaded play. And I just think that that one pass you're talking about where Trae kind of picks it off and off he goes to the races, that was old Marcus Smart play. Let me get the ball out of my hands. We need to push the pace. Hell to everything else. This is what I'm doing. When it was quite clear that Trae had that passing lane kind of covered, right?
Yeah. There was nothing there.
No.
There was a guy, I don't know if it was Capella, whoever it was. There was another guy behind him, too. Like, it wasn't like it's just I got to get this by Trae. There was another defender right there.
And then you ask yourself, why didn't he call for a screen? Why didn't he escape dribble a little bit further away from the perimeter, kind of remove that pressure and then scan the floor? And that's the type of Marcus Smart play that we got very used to seeing a few years back. That hasn't really been prevalent in his game recently. But that kind of leans into the fact that no one was resetting the pressure. Nobody was taking the wind out of Atlanta's sails. They kept making shots. They kept upping the pressure on defense. And until there's a break there, until someone hits a deflating free, like, whether Tatum, Brown, Smart, whoever hits one of those threes or a timeout is called, that pressure will inevitably lead to a stupid play or two. And I just felt like that was a culmination of everything that Atlanta had been doing for a few minutes that kind of put Marcus Smart in a position to fail. And it just so happened he was the guy that made the stupid pass.
Well, while we're on Marcus, another very Marcus play that felt entirely unnecessary, that loose ball foul, 15.8 seconds left to go. He's D'ing up on Trae Young up by the midcourt line and, taps the ball loose. And without really an angle and without much of a reason, dives for the ball. Now, this felt like the Marcus Smart hero hustle play. And I feel like usually with a hustle play, it's very rarely is a hustle play considered a hero play. With Marcus Smart, we've seen this before. He's done it before. We know like you said, we know what this looks like. And it's not fake hustle, but it's poor IQ. It was poor IQ in the moment. I'm not saying he has poor IQ consistently, but in that moment, I mean, he did everything right up until he dove for the ball in an angle at a position where there was basically no other option but to foul Trae Young in that moment. And why? And just I just don't know what the reason was with under 16 seconds why you would go dive for that ball and not just recommit yourself to making Trae Young's life hell. You didn't need to do it, but he wanted to be the hero.
Yeah.
Because that is part of Marcus Smart's DNA.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Ask yourself, it's very easy. Ask yourself what happens if he gets the ball, kicks it out, the Celtics score and they win by 2. You look back at that play, like Marcus Smart won that game. He changed that game. And that's why. Because like you said, it's in his DNA to want to be that guy. The fan base, for the most part, love him. He loves the fan base.
And that's a big reason why a lot of the fan base loves him, because he does put his body on the line, does stuff like that. But just last night, it was
ridiculous.
It was so reckless. It was so reckless. You're in the bone. Like he's at mid court.
Especially after what happened with him and Steph last season, where he'd done a reckless dive, hurt Steph, and then it was a question of, was it a basketball play? Was it not a basketball play? And we haven't really seen Smart do something like that since then, until that game, until last night. So, I'm not a big fan of it. I'm also not a fan of, because he's Marcus Smart, he gets to play over Brogdon or over Derek White. It does feel like there's some very defined hierarchy in Mazzulla's rotations.
Well, it's confusing. I mean, we talked about this as part of it because, with about 4 minutes left or so, it was the Derek White, 2 bigs in the Jays lineup. And then about, 30 seconds later, Derek White was out and Marcus Smart was in. And this is when I joked about earlier, like, I don't know if this was an offensive defensive thing. Like I was trying to figure out what the hell the reasoning was for
Sorry,
it.
I joined and I woke up mad early. You were not boring me. Sorry.
It's all good, man. Believe me, I'm gonna need a nap after this. This is a several coffee type of day after what the Celtics did to me last night. So I totally get it, but this is just where it's very confusing. And here's one last play that I want to highlight. And if you have another one, we can add it on top of this. But the other play that I want to highlight, and this is one where, once again, I want to stress, Jaylen Brown was amazing in this game. Jaylen Brown was the best player for 43 minutes of this game until Trae Young, who deserves his props, last night was the reason that anyone holds on. If you're a Trae Young believer, the reason you hold on to any belief in Trae Young is what he did last night. That dude came out with, ended the game with a Randy Marsh size, wheelbarrow, just carrying his ball sack around the TD Garden. Like the dude did it. Like, listen, the dude's fearless. He hit the shots. They were big time. That's the reason that if you're a Trae Young believer, you look to those moments. Jaylen Brown was awesome. For the first 43 minutes, he was the unquestioned best player. On that last play where he's guarding Trae Young full court, I have 2 issues. I have one issue. I think everybody besides maybe Jaylen Brown knew the exact spot that Trae Young was going to pull up from, and I don't understand why he sagged off him as much as he did. Trae Young had a shot blocked 7 times in the game last night. If he's going to drive, let him drive. Let him try to draw contact. Have faith in your defense. And if he makes a play, he makes a play. But you knew he was going for that shot. That's his go-to. That's his comfort zone. That's his Jason Tatum step back to his left. That's that same shot for Trae Young. And it felt like everyone knew that was coming. Yet for some reason, Jaylen Brown was sagged off, and I couldn't understand that. That's number one. And then number 2, this is a more coaching thing. Maybe you send a double. Maybe you send a double at some point when he gets over half court because you know what he wants to do. And other than Bogdanovic, especially with DeJounte Murray out, which once again, DeJounte Murray's out of this game. He's back in game 6, guys. He's back on Thursday. He's the guy who's probably been their best player of the series. Other than Bogdanovic, I'll live with DeAndre Hunter, Sadiq Bey,
John Collins. I'll live with all of them.
Even John Collins, who showed up for the first time all series last night. I'll let them take it. If Trae Young's gonna have to pass out because he doesn't want to, so make him do what he doesn't want to do in that moment and send that double. Let them take that shot. Live with that shot. Live with whatever angle Trae has to get that pass off at to get to them in time to take a shot with your season on the line. And those 2 things, Jaylen sagging off and not potentially utilizing a double team to get the ball out of Trae's hands. Adam, I don't know what your thoughts are, but I can't understand either of those.
So Jaylen's never been. How can I word this? Jaylen has never reached his defensive potential. We saw it a few years back where he played some really good on-ball defense for a season, and everyone was like, yo, he's figuring it out. Jason Tatum's a better off-ball defender. Jaylen Brown's a better on-ball defender. And then it kind of went away again, right? I think that there are times where you watch Jaylen Brown playing, you're like, dude, did you pay attention to the scouting report? You're getting back cut, you're getting beat here, you're getting beat there. It's things that players do to guys on a nightly basis. It's never something they do to Jaylen Brown that's new. It's always what they consistently do, but Jaylen had that brain fart moment. Playing so far off of a guy that has limitless range, you wouldn't do it to Steph Curry, so why would you do it to Trae Young? Do you know what I mean? So I had the same issue there. I also thought that asking Jaylen Brown to be the guy to pick him up at half court was just a bad decision in itself.
Yeah, that was a little bit strange, right? I would have thought that was either Derek White or Marcus Smart.
Exactly.
Would have been in that position.
Yeah,
I agree with that as well.
They're going to hound you. So that's coaching, or at least an on-court coach like Marcus Smart should have called for a scram there and tried to switch Brown out of there quickly. Do you know what I mean? And get a Derek White onto him or a Marcus Smart. So I had an issue there. Sagging off him, I've got an issue. Doubling was something I hadn't considered, but that sounds like a very Brad Stevens move.
Yeah.
Like, Brad Stevens would have sent the double there. Then he would have had somebody kind of play that passing lane, like one pass away, and somebody would have been there to try and poke the ball loose on that pass. You also wear the clock down because Trae Young, as you said, don't want to pass. He's got to find the pass. The clock's ticking. You can do some stuff from that position. I agree there. I will say that my biggest thing, and this is kind of a cop-out, but it's true, my biggest thing is they should never have been in that position where they needed to shut Trae down the stretch.
Yeah.
No DeJounte Murray. You've led the game most of the way through. You shit the bed in the last 5 minutes, and now you're having to try and play defense. And it's just, sometimes guys are going to make a play. Trae Young had the offense completely running through him in this game because Murray weren't there. And then I'm going to end with this, and this is what I said I'd say at the start of the episode. And then if you want to talk about anything else, we can do that. I genuinely believe giving Joe Mazzulla a full-time contract at the All-Star break was a mistake. I think they should have waited till the off-season and seen how he did in the postseason. Now, that could sound horrible when the Celtics go and win a championship in a few weeks. It could sound prophetic if the Hawks pull out 2 wins. And you know what I mean? Like, what are we doing?
We're living
here?
in that where that's a reality.
What are we doing here?
I think it's a little bit almost like the kind of weird enough, kind of like the Grant Williams situation, right? Like it might have been better to play it out, address it in the off season. But I think that, and then we'll wrap on this here, Adam. The last point, to try to find a silver lining in this. The Celtics are not a great team; they're a good team. And lucky for them, I don't think there's a great team in the NBA this year. I think we're seeing that with Milwaukee down 3-1. We're seeing that with, the chaos that is the Western Conference. We're seeing that with Joel Embiid being hurt again like clockwork. James Harden coming in banged up. For all the good that the Knicks look, and we've given the Knicks some praise on this podcast, they're up 3-1 over the Cavs. Julius Randle, their best or second best player, is a mess, and they struggled to crack 100 points, but they're up 3-1. And so when you look around at the league, like I said, it's hard for me to take this as a serious team. But I don't know if there isn't necessarily another serious team out there that I'm going to pin to and say they can't beat that team. So
the Knicks are playing more Celtics basketball than the Celtics right now, if you look at last season's Celtics. And that's a problem.
Oh, there's a lot of problems. There's a lot of problems with where we're at right now and what this game has led us to and what it means. But I think, as frustrating as it is that we're going to be back here talking on Thursday about the Celtics Hawks Game 6, which still sounds stupid to say out loud, there's still a chance for this team, because I don't think that there's anybody in this league that right now is a great team. And so there's a bunch of good teams. The Celtics are a very, very flawed, but still good team. And, we look back at the most recent Celtics championship. They got taken to 7 games, ironically enough, by a Hawks team that was under 500. And, that was the best regular season team the Celtics have had since the 80s. So basically my final point is, who knows, Adam? Who knows? This doesn't feel good. This was a therapy session to get us through the day, to get us to Thursday. Any other final thoughts here before we wrap this up? Because I don't know what else to make of this. Who knows, Adam?
I've gave all my thoughts, man. I'm completely out. Celtics in 6, apparently.
Yeah, apparently that's the mode to go. Celtics in 6. We'll check back in after the game Thursday. Likely myself, the coach Greg Manakis, will be hitting y'all with a live stream after the game. Make sure you are following us on YouTube. We want to get y'all's thoughts. Hopefully it's one of victory and not misery, like unfortunately Adam and I had to put ourselves through this morning. But Adam, my guy, always a pleasure to see you. I'm sorry it's under these circumstances. Next time we reconvene, I hope that we have a lot more positivity and a lot more time that we can actually look at some of the other crazy stuff. I thought we were going to have a lot of time to spread our wings today. We had 0 time to spread our wings. We didn't talk about Ime Udoka going to Houston. We didn't have a chance to talk about Jimmy Butler. We didn't have a chance to talk about all the craziness in the West. But hopefully this weekend we'll have a chance to do that. Adam, as always, appreciate hanging out with you. That's going to do it for our edition here of Green with Envy. Appreciate everybody for tuning in and listening. We will catch all later this week. Game 6, Celtics, Hawks, Thursday night. Have a great day, y'all. Peace.
Peace.